Welcome back to the West Virginia Legislature on the West Virginia Channel. I'm Beth Voorhees. The House is set to go into session at 11 o'clock this morning. However, the House Finance Committee is still meeting. It met at 9 o'clock this morning, a start time, and the members were questioning Secretary Bowling of the Department of Health and Human Resources regarding budget matters. I also heard Secretary Randy Huffman of the Department of Environmental Protection being quizzed by House Finance Committee members regarding budget matters at the DEP, so it could be that the House session will be delayed. The Senate session was delayed this morning. It had a 10 o'clock start time. It didn't start until almost 10:35. Very quick floor session. They only took on second reading Senate Bill 1005. That's the governor's bill to increase the excise tax on cigarettes, e-cigarettes, and other tobacco products. That bill on second reading was referred to the Senate Finance Committee. That committee meets at 1 o'clock this afternoon, and audio is available on the legislature's website. So wait with us as we wait for House Speaker Tim Armstead to gavel in this floor session of the first extraordinary session of the 82nd West Virginia Legislature.
House will be in order. All those not having privileges to the floor will please vacate the chamber. Members and guests will please rise as we are led in prayer today by the gentleman from the 53rd, Delegate Smith.
Lord, we just thank you for the honor and privilege that's given to us to serve the people of West Virginia, Lord. We just thank you for the wonderful day you've given us, Lord, and we just ask that you open our minds and open our heart, Lord, as we tackle this budget problem with the state, Lord, and that cooler heads prevail. We just ask that you just be with us and just lead, guide, and direct us, and forgive us where we have failed you. And these favors and blessings we ask in Jesus' most precious and holy name. Amen.
Amen. Members and guests will please remain standing as we're led in the Pledge of Allegiance today by the gentleman from the 6th, Delegate Romi.
Would you join me as we honor our flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Reading of the journal.
Journal of the House of Delegates, Charleston, Monday, May 15, 2016.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 32nd, Delegate Perry.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the further reading of the journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read.
The gentleman from 32nd asks unanimous consent that further reading of the journal be dispensed with and to be approved as having been read. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Journal will be approved as having been read. Gentleman from the 58th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request a roll call to establish a quorum.
The gentleman from the 58th asks for a roll call to establish the presence of a quorum. All members will indicate their presence by voting. Clerk, please prepare the machine. Has each member voted? So the clerk will close the machine, ascertain the result. There being 89 members present, 11 absent, a quorum is established. Introduction of guests. Gentleman from the 4th, Delegate Farrow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With us today we have State Senate candidate Lisa Zukoff and recent WVU graduate.
We know the
Josh
House
Law
is in session.
from
They
the
have not
Mount Zion
activated
area.
their
Would you
floor
please
camera
stand and let the House
system
take a vote?
yet, and they are working on that. So bear with us and listen in as the House of Delegates has convened.
Gentleman from the 10th, Delegate Deeb.
Aye. I am here.
Gentleman's presence will be noted, be recorded. So, further introductions. Reports of standing committees. Reports of select committees. Messages from the executive. Messages from the Senate. Resolutions. Petitions. Motions. Bills introduced. Unfinished business. Bills on third reading. Bills on second reading. Bills on first reading. Leaves of absence. Gentleman from the 58th.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. For our colleagues, delegates Duke, Fleischauer, Fluharty, Manchin, Markham, Purdue, R. Phillips, Rowe, Schott, and Treecost.
Without objection, leaves will be granted. Marks by members of the House. Gentleman from the 38th, Delegate Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I know we have work to do, and so I'll try to be short, be quick about these remarks. First of all, you may have seen a headline in the Gazette that says "Leadership Needed in the Budget Battle," and I would suggest to you that that is exactly right. Leadership is what we need. We've been presented with an opportunity as the leaders of this state to make a determination as to exactly what size government our people and our citizens are able to afford. Now, I would suggest to you that the easy thing to do is raise taxes. Maybe people don't think that. Maybe people think that it's hard to raise taxes. But I can tell you it took us many, many, many years to even convince people it was a good idea to start restructuring the tax code. And so now, here in the middle of this crisis, when families in West Virginia are struggling, I think it's important to show the type of leadership that is expected of us. Not to do the easy things. That's not why we were hired. We were not hired to do the easy. We were hired to do the hard, to do the difficult, to make the tough, necessary choices going forward. We heard yesterday about it's a revenue problem. It's a revenue problem. Well, maybe it is a revenue problem. And maybe it's because of the downturn in the economy. Maybe it's because of energy prices. Maybe it's because 50 or 60,000 more people are unemployed in West Virginia now than were a decade ago. Those are revenue problems. But those are revenue problems not just for the state budget. Those are revenue problems for the family budget. So when we talk about a balanced approach I want a balanced approach. The approach that I'm asking us to exercise leadership on is a balanced approach where we balance on one side the state budget and we balance on the other side the family budget. That's the balancing act that we need to perform. It's difficult. It's difficult when we know that by making necessary cuts, by right-sizing our state budget to fit what our friends, neighbors, and families across West Virginia can afford, that we're going to hear about it. Some people are not going to be happy. Some people will campaign against us. But the fact of the matter is, there is no economic principle, none, that says in a recession, government should tax more and spend the same amount of money. None. Even Keynesians support taxing more and spending more. And that's not what this does. This taxes more. It takes money from families. Make no mistake, it's from families to offer the same level of services. And that's a mistake because the burden falls on the families. It's not balanced. Not balanced. Now, we've all looked through the budget. We've all tried to come up with ideas. We've all shared with the chairman, and the chairman and finance committee have done great work coming up with ideas and suggestions. But now it's up to us. It's up to us to make the hard choices. What are we willing to cut? What are we willing to cut? You know, Secretary Kiss, former Speaker Kiss, yesterday was talking about it's a revenue problem, and you've got a budget next year based on your revenue. And I kept thinking in my head, I'm not sure that the governor is really in a position to be lecturing us about what is a responsible way to proceed forward when the budget that he introduced yesterday, knowing that he had revised the revenue estimates downward by $92 million, was $35 million more than the budget he suggested we pass in January. He was $128 million away from his own revenue estimates. How is that responsible? We've got to find a way forward to right-size this budget. Because they're right. Next year, the problem's going to be bigger. And the year after that, the problem is going to be bigger. And we're going to go back again next year and ask for more taxes. We're going to ask the people who are struggling, who are out of work, who are barely making it, to choose again. Are you going to balance the state budget? Or are you going to balance your family budget? Are you going to provide cars for people who work for the government? Or are you going to make your car payment? Are you going to pay for government agencies and employees to go to conferences in Miami and Las Vegas and Philadelphia? Or West Virginia families, are you going to get to go on a weekend vacation with your family this year? That's the balancing act that we've got to perform. That's the leadership that we need to exercise. We've got a long and a tough road, and I recognize that. And I respect everybody here for every opinion. But the fact of the matter is, it is difficult in a recession. It is unfathomable in a recession to go to the people who are hurting the most and ask them to pay more, with the only promise being, next year, we're going to ask you to pay even more. If we will not make the hard decisions and the hard cuts and right-size this budget now, when we're in the middle of a deficit, in the middle of a recession, when will we right-size this budget?
Further remarks by members? Gentleman from the 16th, Doug Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As many stand on the floor and say, I had not planned to speak today. But in 20 years, I've seen the can kicked down the road many times on many things. I wouldn't mention, I would be remiss in not mentioning maybe, we kicked it in 2013 when we didn't try to pass a 1-cent sales tax, which would have made things a whole lot easier at this point. Maybe we're not trying to make things easier. I can't believe that we're going to make these cuts and not hurt the people who are hurting the most, because we'll be cutting education, we'll be cutting health, we'll be cutting other state services. We won't be putting any money into roads that, in an article this morning, is costing each West Virginian $781 a year to keep their automobiles going because the roads aren't good. So what are we going to do? We're going to make cuts. I agree we can make cuts, but I just don't believe we can move forward without serious revenue enhancement. We can get out of 2016 all right with sweeps. We can probably get out of 2017 with the cuts. And I'm not going to be here next year, nor the year after in 2018, when some of you, I assume some of you will get reelected. After this, I'm not sure what may happen about that. Be that as it may, in 2018, you'll have a problem. You'll have a big problem if you don't start to work on it now. We've kicked the can before. I don't think this is the time to do it. There are probably 20 of us in here that aren't running for reelection. Maybe that's a group that we could get together to really decide what we should do, because it's not going to directly affect us. It's going to directly affect those of you who are running for office. I realize that. But that is a problem that we all have. I do agree with the gentleman from Kanawha that it is something none of us will like. We won't like what the results are. I'm not sure the public will like what the results are. But as a child, you remember, maybe you do, I'm older, when medicines weren't flavored, take this, it's good for you, but it doesn't taste good. Well, maybe that's what we need. It doesn't taste good, but we'll have to do it. I suggest that we look at it from a different angle. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further remarks by members? Miscellaneous business, gentleman from 58.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Subject to announcements, I move the House adjourn until 11 a.m. tomorrow.
Are there announcements? Gentleman from the 64th, Doggett Householder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Finance will meet this afternoon beginning at 3 p.m. for a discussion on bills pending in the Committee of Finance.
Gentleman from 38, Doggett Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, the Republican members of the Judiciary Committee will meet at 1 p.m. in room 252. Republican members of Judiciary Committee, 1 p.m. and 252.
Gentleman from the 66, Doggett Espinosa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Republican members of the House Education Committee will caucus at noon in room 252. Again, that's Republican members of the House Education Committee caucusing at noon in room 252.
Lady from the 31st, Doggett Arbonne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Republican members of the Government Organization Committee will caucus at 2 p.m. in room 252. Thank you.
Further announcements? Not the question for the House is the motion by the gentleman from the 58th that the House stand adjourned until 11 a.m. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Declare the House adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow.
And a very brief floor session there, not unusual for an extraordinary session like this when there are very few bills to consider, and most of them are in the finance committees of both the House and Senate. The House of Delegates will reconvene at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. The Senate is set to go in at 3:30 this afternoon. Since the Senate Finance Committee is meeting at 1 o'clock, if they take up Senate Bill 1005, that's the excise tax on cigarettes, e-cigarettes, and tobacco products, If that is reported to the floor at the Senate Finance Committee meeting this afternoon at 1 o'clock, we will expect to join the Senate for its floor session at 3:30, or in Senate time probably quite a bit past that. We will alert you as to whether or not the West Virginia Channel will provide live coverage of the 3:30 Senate Finance floor session, as soon as we know what has happened to Senate Bill 1005. It left the Senate today on second reading. It was referred to the Senate Finance Committee. If the Finance Committee takes that up and passes it out to the floor, we will join the Senate at 3:30 this afternoon. We'll be back in the House tomorrow at 11. Remember that audio of all of these committee meetings is available on the West Virginia Legislature's website. Until then, I'm Beth Voorhees for the West Virginia Channel, a service of West Virginia Public Broadcasting.